Kim Do-hyun was drinking his coffee in the Terran Assembly headquarters when the alarm started. He set down his cup calmly and walked to the window. Above New York City, a hole had appeared in the sky itself. It was not a cloud or a storm. It was a tear in space, glowing purple and gold at the edges, and from it came ships. Hundreds of ships, then thousands. They were massive things, bigger than anything humans had ever built. The smallest was the size of a football stadium. The largest blocked out the sun over Manhattan. They hung in the air like gods looking down at insects. Do-hyun watched them for a long moment. He was 58 years old. He had fought in 3 wars. He had buried friends and made peace with enemies. Nothing in his life had prepared him for this. But he did not panic. He simply turned to his assistant and said, "Get me Park Soo-jin. Get me Lee Jin-ho. Get me Baek Yuna. We have work to do." Within an hour, every screen on Earth showed the same image. A being made of living crystal stood in what appeared to be a throne room. It was tall, perhaps 3 meters, and light moved through its body like blood through veins. When it spoke, the translation came in every human language at once. "I am Ambassador Veth of the Galactic Sovereignty Council. We have ruled this region of space for 50,000 of your years. Every intelligent species in our domain has accepted our guidance and protection. Today, we extend this gift to humanity." Do-hyun listened carefully. He noticed that Veth did not ask. He announced, "Earth will submit to council governance. You will provide 40% of your planetary resources as tribute. You will provide labor allocations from your population to serve council needs. In exchange, you will receive protection from external threats and access to selected technologies." The broadcast continued for 20 minutes. Veth explained the structure of the council. 12 ancient species ruled over hundreds of younger ones. Those who accepted council rule lived in peace. Those who did not. But Veth smiled when he reached this part. No species had ever refused. The question had never come up. "We will arrive in 7 of your days to formalize your submission. Prepare your leaders. Prepare your people. Prepare to join civilization." The transmission ended. Do-hyun met with his cabinet in the underground bunker called the Warren. It was buried deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, built decades ago for exactly this kind of emergency. Around the table sat the people he trusted most. Park Soo-jin was the Secretary of Defense. She was 45 with short gray hair and eyes that never seemed to blink. She had flown fighter jets before taking command of Earth's military forces. Lee Jin-ho was the Chief Science Advisor. He was a thin man with thick glasses who had spent his life studying quantum physics. For the last 20 years, he had led humanity's most secret project. Baek Yuna was the Director of Intelligence. She was the youngest person at the table, only 41, but she knew more secrets than anyone alive. Her department had been watching the stars for a very long time. "Report," Do-hyun said simply. Soo-jin spoke first. 3,200 ships in orbit. Based on energy readings, their weapons could glass the planet in about 6 hours if they wanted to. "They won't," Yuna said. "They want our resources and our labor. Dead humans and a burned planet give them nothing." "What do we know about them?" Do-hyun asked. Yuna pulled up files on the holographic display. "More than they think. We detected their communication signals 11 years ago. We've been listening ever since. The Council has ruled through fear for thousands of years, but here's the interesting part." She paused. "They've never actually fought a war." Everyone looked at her. "They expand by intimidation. They show up with overwhelming force, make demands, and species submit. It's worked every single time. They have procedures for occupation, procedures for resource extraction, procedures for everything. What they don't have is combat doctrine. They've never needed it." Jin-ho leaned forward. "And the technology gap?" "Significant. Their ships are faster, their shields are stronger, their weapons are more powerful, But technology isn't everything. They think it is, because no one has ever shown them otherwise. Do-yun was quiet for a long moment. Everyone waited. Sujin, he finally said. Project Thistle. What's our status? Sujin allowed herself a small smile. Green across the board. We've been preparing for this for 30 years. Defense platforms are hidden throughout the system. Jinho's quantum disruptors are ready for deployment. We have weapons they've never seen and tactics they've never imagined. They gave us 7 days, Do-yun said. They think we'll use that time to accept our fate, to prepare for slavery. He looked around the table at each of them. We're going to use it differently. 5 days to finalize everything. 2 days to position our forces. When Ambassador Veth comes back for our surrender, he's going to get something else entirely. And if we lose? Jinho asked quietly. Their fleet could destroy us. Then we die free, Do-yun said. But I don't intend to lose. They've never faced anyone who fights back. They've forgotten what war actually looks like. We're going to remind them. He stood up. Get to work. We have 5 days to change the galaxy. As his cabinet rushed to their tasks, Do-hyun walked to the window of the bunker. There was no view here, just rock and steel. But in his mind, he saw those massive ships hanging over his world like a threat. They thought they were predators. They thought humanity were sheep. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Park Soo-jin stood in a command center buried beneath the Pacific Ocean. Around her, hundreds of officers worked at their stations. Screens showed the positions of every Council ship in orbit. More screens showed something the Council did not know about: humanity's hidden teeth. Activate the lunar array, she ordered. Deep beneath the surface of the moon, machines that had slept for decades woke up. They were built into the rock itself, invisible to any scan. To the Council, the moon was a dead rock. They did not know that humans had hollowed out parts of it and filled those spaces with weapons. Similar activations happened across the solar system. On Mars, what appeared to be mining equipment revealed hidden railgun barrels. On the moons of Neptune, power plants that seemed abandoned suddenly hummed with energy. In the asteroid belt, rocks that had drifted for years adjusted their orbits slightly because they were not rocks at all. Project Thistle had begun 30 years ago, when humanity first detected signals from deep space. The world's governments had argued about many things, but they agreed on one point. If something was out there, humanity needed to be ready. So they built. They hid. They waited. Now the waiting was over. In another part of the Warren, Lee Jinho worked without sleep. His laboratory was filled with pieces of alien technology recovered from a crashed probe in 2089. For 20 years, his team had studied these fragments. They had not unlocked faster-than-light travel. The physics were too complex, the engineering too advanced. But they had found something else. Council ships were held together by quantum bonds, forces that made their hulls incredibly strong. Jinho had learned how to break those bonds. His quantum disruptors were small devices, no bigger than a human fist. When attached to a Council hull, they would cause the ship to simply fall apart. Metal would become dust. The strongest warship would dissolve like sugar in water. How many do we have? Soo-jin asked during one of her visits. 400,000, Jinho replied. Enough for every ship in their fleet with plenty left over. And they'll work? Jinho smiled tiredly. We tested them on fragments of recovered hull material. The effect is instantaneous. The Council has never seen anything like this because no one has ever thought to try. They believe their ships are invincible. Good, Soo-jin said. Let's keep it that way until the last possible moment. Baek-yuna had her own preparations. In a dark room filled with servers, she commanded an army of digital ghosts. For 11 years, her hackers had been infiltrating Council systems. It was slow work, Council technology was advanced, their security was complex, but Yuna was patient, and her people were very, very good. "We have access to their communication network," she reported to Do-Yun on day 3. "When we trigger our attack, we can blind them completely. No ship will be able to talk to any other ship. Their admiral won't be able to give orders. Their captains won't know what's happening. For about 17 minutes, they'll be deaf and blind." 17 minutes, Do-Hyun repeated. "That's our window. After that, they'll switch to backup systems and restore communications. But 17 minutes should be enough to cause chaos." Do-Hyun nodded slowly. "What else have you learned from their communications?" Yuna pulled up a file. "Their psychology. They're not evil exactly. They genuinely believe they're doing us a favor. Every species they've conquered has been weaker, more primitive. They've never met an equal. They literally cannot imagine losing. It's not arrogance. It's just they have no experience with failure. That's about to change." On day 5, Sujin briefed the military commanders. They gathered in the Warren's war room, men and women from every nation on Earth. Old rivalries meant nothing now. There was only humanity and the threat above. "They have superior ships," Sujin told them. "Superior weapons, superior shields, superior speed. On paper we should lose, but paper doesn't fight wars. People do, and we have something they don't. We know what it means to struggle, to fight against odds, to refuse to quit even when winning seems impossible." She showed them the battle plan. Phase 1. Yuna's cyber attack to blind the enemy. Phase 2. Drone swarms carrying Jinho's disruptors. Phase 3. Heavy weapons from across the system hitting the confused and damaged fleet. "This will be fast and brutal," she said. "We won't have a second chance. Either we break them in the first hour, or they break us. There is no middle ground." The commanders asked questions, they made suggestions, some adjustments were made. By the end, everyone knew their role. Meanwhile, Earth's cities quietly emptied. The council thought the evacuation was preparation for tribute ceremonies. They did not suspect that humans were moving to underground shelters, away from any potential retaliation strikes. Let the council think humanity was lining up to surrender. The truth would come soon enough. On day 7, Ambassador Veth's shuttle descended through Earth's atmosphere. He was pleased. The humans had behaved exactly as expected. Soon another species would join the council's domain. Another world would provide resources and labor. Everything was proceeding normally. His shuttle landed in New York. The city was dark. No crowds waited to greet him. No human leaders stood ready to submit. Veth felt something he had not felt in centuries: uncertainty. "Where are they?" his aide asked. Veth opened a communication channel to his fleet. "Report." "Where are the humans?" Static answered him. Then a human voice, calm and cold. "They're right here, Ambassador. We've been waiting for you." Above Earth, the sky lit up with fire. Admiral Quan Tasik sat in his command chair inside a hollowed-out asteroid. Around him, his crew watched screens that showed every council ship in orbit. For years, this asteroid had drifted through space like a dead rock. Now it was the brain of humanity's counterattack. "Begin Phase 1, Tasik ordered. Across the solar system, Beck Yuna's digital weapons struck. The Council's communication network died in an instant. Ships that had been talking to each other suddenly went silent. Admirals lost contact with their captains. Captains lost contact with their crews. 3,000 warships became 3,000 blind, confused islands. On the Council flagship Eternal Mandate, alarms screamed. Grand Admiral Rethick stared at his screens in disbelief. Every display showed the same thing: no signal. "What is happening?" he demanded. No one could answer him. No one knew. "Begin Phase 2, Tasik said. From the moon's hidden bases, from asteroids, from platforms floating in Earth's shadow, the drones launched. There were hundreds of thousands of them, each one smaller than a human hand. They were too tiny to appear on council sensors. They were designed to look like space dust. But each drone carried one of Li Jinho's quantum disruptors. They swarmed toward the council fleet like invisible locusts. They attached to hulls, finding gaps in shields that were designed to stop missiles and energy beams, not specks of metal. And then they activated. The effect was terrible and beautiful. Council ships began to dissolve. Metal that had survived impacts and battles for centuries turned to powder and drifted away. A destroyer simply fell apart, its crew spilling into space. A cruiser lost its entire rear section and began spinning wildly. A carrier cracked down the middle like an egg. On the Eternal Mandate, Rethik watched his fleet dying and could not understand what he was seeing. "Our ships," he whispered. "What is doing this?" "Begin Phase 3, Tasik ordered. Now the heavy weapons fired. From Mars, railguns launched projectiles at 3% of light speed. From Neptune's moons, energy beams crossed the void. From hidden platforms throughout the system, missiles streaked toward the confused enemy. The Council ships tried to respond. Some managed to raise shields. Some fired back blindly. But they were shooting at enemies they could not see, fighting a battle they did not understand. Their procedures were useless. Their training had not prepared them for this, because they had never trained for war. They had only trained for victory parades. Admiral Tasik watched the battle unfold. His face showed no joy, only focus. This was not a game. People were dying on those ships, aliens who had never expected to face death today. But they had come to enslave his people. They had demanded humanity's children as labor. They had left no choice. "Enemy fleet at 60% strength," an officer reported. 50%, 40. In 17 minutes, Yuna's cyber attack would end. The Council would regain communications. If Rethik could rally his fleet, they might still win through sheer numbers. "All batteries focus fire on the flagship," Tasik ordered. "Cut off the head." The Eternal Mandate shuddered as dozens of impacts struck it at once. Its shields held, but barely. Warning lights flashed across its bridge. Rethik finally understood what was happening. This was not a malfunction. This was not an accident. This was an attack. A real attack. Something the Council had not faced in 10,000 years. He managed to establish a direct communication line to Earth's surface, bypassing the jammed network. "President Kim," he shouted when the connection opened. "This is madness. You cannot win this. The full might of the Council will—" Do-Yun's face appeared on screen. He looked calm, almost peaceful. "Ambassador Veth," Do-Yun said, "you offered us slavery and called it protection. You demanded our children and called it labor allocation. You expected us to kneel and thank you for the chains." He leaned forward. "We decline." The communication cut off. On the Eternal Mandate, Rethik made a decision. Pride meant nothing if everyone died. He activated the ship's emergency systems and tore open a rift in space. The flagship lurched through it, fleeing the battle. A handful of other ships saw what their admiral did and followed. They ran, leaving their fellow ships behind. Those left behind were not so lucky. Without leadership, without communications, they fell one by one. When the shooting finally stopped, debris filled Earth's orbit. The mighty Council fleet had been broken. Of 3,000 ships, fewer than 400 escaped. The rest were dust and wreckage. Admiral Tasik allowed himself one long breath. Then he opened a channel to Earth. "Mr. President, the battle is over. We have won." In the Warren, Do-Hyun closed his eyes for a moment. Around him, his cabinet erupted in cheers. Park Soo-jin actually laughed out loud, a sound her staff had never heard before. Lee Jin-ho slumped in his chair, exhausted but relieved. Only Baek Yuna remained serious. She was already looking at new data, new intercepts. "They'll come back," she said quietly. "This wasn't their full strength. This was an occupation force. When the council learns what happened here, they'll send everything they have." Do-Yun nodded. "I know. How long do we have?" Yuna checked her screens. 18 months, maybe less. "Then we have 18 months to prepare." Do-Yun looked at his cabinet. "And 18 months to find allies. Because this fight isn't over. It's just beginning." Outside, the people of Earth emerged from their shelters and looked up at a sky full of debris. They had been told to prepare for slavery. Instead, they had won a victory. But everyone knew this was only the first battle. The real war was still to come. The 12 ruling species sat in their ancient seats, each one representing civilizations older than human history. At the center stood High Sovereign Melthos, a being of pure energy contained in a crystal shell. He had led the council for 300 years. He had never faced a crisis like this. "How?" he demanded. "How did primitives destroy our fleet?" Ambassador Veth stood before them, his crystalline body cracked and dim from the stress of escape. "They had weapons we did not expect. They attacked our communications. They used devices that dissolved our ships." "Dissolved?" asked Sovereign Thex of the Corthan, his scaled face twisted in confusion. "What does that mean?" "I do not know how to explain it better. Our hulls simply came apart, turned to dust." The hall erupted in arguments. Some demanded immediate revenge, others demanded Veth's execution for failure. Others simply could not believe what they were hearing. "Enough!" Melthos silenced them with a wave of energy. "We must decide our response. I will hear proposals." Admiral Rethick, who had fled with Veth, stepped forward. "We must send the Grand Fleet, every warship we have. We will crush them so completely that no species will ever think of resistance again." "The Grand Fleet," Sovereign Yenna of the Silith said slowly. Her people were traders, not warriors, and she understood numbers. "Do you know what that would cost? The resources to move 3,000 more ships across that distance? The economic disruption?" "The cost of not responding is higher," Rethick argued. "If word spreads that primitives defeated a council fleet, every subjugated species will start dreaming of rebellion." "Word has already spread," Beck Yuna could have told them if she were there. Her spies were everywhere. Far across the galaxy, on 100 different worlds, enslaved peoples watched stolen recordings of the Battle of Earth. They saw council ships dying. They saw humans fighting back. They saw something they had been told was impossible. Resistance that succeeded. On the Ven homeworld, Representative Thiel watched the recording in a hidden basement. Her people had served the council for 300 years. Their planet had been stripped of resources. Their population had been allocated to work in council mines and factories. Hope was a word they had almost forgotten. But now, watching human ships tear through council formations, Thiel felt something stir in her chest. "They refused," she whispered. "They actually refused." She was not the only one watching. Not the only one hoping. Back on Earth, Li Jinho led the effort to study captured council technology. The wreckage in orbit contained treasures beyond imagination. Within 3 months, his team achieved their first faster-than-light jump. Within 5 months, they had improved the efficiency of council drives by 40%. "How is this possible?" one of his assistants asked. "The council has had this technology for thousands of years. How are we improving it so quickly?" Jinho smiled. "Because they stopped trying. When you rule everything, when no one challenges you, why would you innovate? They built these drives 10,000 years ago and never improved them because they never needed to. We don't have that luxury. We have to be better, or we die." Beck Yuna focused on a different kind of weapon: information. Her expanded network reached into council space, making contact with species who had submitted long ago but never stopped dreaming of freedom. The first official message came from the Ven. Thiel risked everything to send it. We watched your battle. We watched you refuse. We had forgotten that refusal was possible. We wish to remember. Similar messages came from others. The Korthan rebels, the Sealeth merchants who hated council taxes, the Mendari workers who labored in conditions no human would accept. One by one, they reached out to Earth. Park Soo-jin was skeptical. How do we know this isn't a trap? The Council could be using these species to get information about our defenses. Some of them might be traps, Yuna admitted, but not all. The Council has made too many enemies over too many years. They just never had to worry about it before because no one could fight back. We've shown that fighting back is possible. Now everyone who ever wanted revenge has hope. Do-hyun made the decision. We build a coalition. Carefully. We verify each contact. But we reach out. Because when the Grand Fleet comes, and it will come, we can't defeat it alone. In the Hall of Sovereigns, Melthos made his own decision. We will send the Grand Fleet, he announced. Every warship we can gather. We will not simply defeat these humans. We will erase them. Their planet will be burned. Their species will be ended. And every other species in our domain will see what happens to those who resist. The sovereigns voted. It was unanimous. But Yuna was watching through compromised systems. She saw the vote. She heard the plans. She knew exactly how many ships were coming. She brought the information to Do-hyun. 3,000 ships in the First Fleet, she reported. They're pulling more from across their territory. Final count will be close to 5,000. The largest military force in Council history. Do-hyun was quiet for a long moment. 18 months? Maybe 14 now. They're moving faster than we expected. Do-hyun nodded slowly. Then, to Yuna's surprise, he smiled. Good. That means they're scared. Scared enemies make mistakes. He turned to his cabinet. Reach out to every contact we have. Tell them the time for hiding is over. Tell them Earth stands against the Council and we're looking for friends. Tell them... He paused, thinking of the right words. Tell them the galaxy is about to change, and they can either watch from the shadows, or they can help us change it. Across Council space, the message spread, and one by one, species that had knelt for generations began to stand. The Grand Fleet arrived at the edge of the solar system like a storm of metal and fire. 5,000 warships, carrying crews from a dozen species, all united by one purpose: the destruction of Earth. Grand Admiral Rethik stood on the bridge of his new flagship, the Eternal Justice. He had requested this command personally. The shame of his retreat burned in him. Today, he would erase that shame with human blood. All ships, advance, he ordered. We will... He stopped. On his screens, something unexpected appeared. The human fleet was waiting for them, not hiding behind their planet, not cowering in defensive positions. They were arranged in open space, ready for battle. And they were not alone. Beside the human ships flew vessels of unfamiliar design, Ven cruisers, their hulls marked with symbols of rebellion. Korthan warships, crewed by soldiers who had deserted council service, Sealeth merchant vessels converted to carriers, and more. Ships from 17 different species, all flying together under a new banner, the coalition of free worlds. Rethik felt a chill run through him. How many ships? Approximately 2,000, Admiral. Plus the humans have significantly more than before. 2,000 rebels plus the human fleet, against 5,000 council ships. The numbers still favored the council, but not by as much as Rethik had expected. It changes nothing, he declared. All ships, attack formation, destroy them all. The Battle of Seoul began. Admiral Kwan Tasik commanded the coalition forces from a new flagship, the TAS Unity. Around him, officers from 5 different species worked together in ways that would have seemed impossible 2 years ago. The Council fleet is engaging, a Ven tactical officer reported. "They outnumber us significantly." "Numbers aren't everything," Tysick replied. He had learned that lesson at the first battle. All ships, execute Pattern Dawn. The coalition fleet split into dozens of smaller groups, each one moving independently. Council ships tried to target them, but the coalition vessels were faster, more agile. They had trained together for months, learning to fight as one force while moving as many. Council ships fell into their old patterns, the same procedures they had used for 10,000 years. But those procedures assumed an enemy who would stand still and accept death. The coalition refused to cooperate. Park Soo-jin led a strike team of boarding ships. Their target, the Eternal Justice itself. Her shuttle dodged through the chaos of battle, past explosions and debris, past dying ships on both sides. Behind her, 200 of humanity's best soldiers waited in silence. They had volunteered for this mission knowing they might not return. "Contact in 60 seconds, her pilot reported. Soo-jin checked her weapon. It was a human design, modified with Ven technology and Sileth engineering, a symbol of what the coalition had become. Different species, working together, creating something stronger than any of them could make alone. The shuttle crashed through the Eternal Justice's shield during a momentary gap and locked onto the hull. Soo-jin led her team through the breach. Council security forces met them in the corridors. They were well-trained but confused. No enemy had ever boarded a Council flagship. There was no procedure for this. Soo-jin's team had no procedures either. They had something better, desperation and rage. They fought through level after level, losing soldiers but never stopping. Finally, they reached the bridge. The doors were sealed, but Lee Jin-ho had given Soo-jin a gift, a quantum key that could open any Council lock. The doors slid open. Grand Admiral Rethik turned to face the humans who had invaded his bridge. His guards raised weapons, but Soo-jin was faster. 3 shots, and the guards fell. Only Rethik remained standing. "You cannot win," he said, his voice steady despite his situation. "Even if you kill me, the Council will send more fleets. You have made enemies of the greatest power in the galaxy." Soo-jin walked toward him slowly. "The greatest power in the galaxy has been living on borrowed time for 10,000 years. You conquered through fear because you forgot how to fight. You enslaved because you forgot how to trade. You demanded obedience because you forgot how to earn respect." She stopped in front of him. "That time is over now." Outside, the battle reached its peak. Coalition ships, fighting with everything they had, began to turn the tide. Council vessels, lacking coordination, lacking morale, began to fall back. Then the final blow came. Across Council space, slave populations rose up. Factories stopped working. Supply lines collapsed. Ships heading to reinforce the Grand Fleet received orders to return home instead, to deal with rebellions on 100 worlds. High Sovereign Melthos watched the reports in growing horror. His empire was falling apart, not from external attack, but from within. Every species the Council had conquered, every population they had exploited, was rising at once. Earth had not just won a battle, Earth had started a revolution. The Grand Fleet surrendered. It had no choice. With rebellions cutting their supply lines and coalition ships destroying their formation, fighting to the death served no purpose. Rethik was brought before President Do-yun in chains. "You have ended everything," Rethik said. "The Council maintained peace for 50,000 years. You have brought chaos." Do-yun looked at him without anger. "We brought choice. What species do with that choice is up to them. Some will make mistakes, some will fight each other, but they will do it as free peoples, not as slaves." Rethik had no answer to that. 3 months later, the Treaty of Earth was signed in the same UN hall where Ambassador Veth had once demanded humanity's surrender. High Sovereign Melthos himself came to sign it, his energy dimmed, his crystal shell cracked with stress. The terms were simple, but revolutionary. The council would continue to exist, but as a voluntary alliance, not a ruling body. No more tribute, no more labor allocations, no more conquest. Every species would govern itself. As Melthos signed, he looked at Do-hyun with something between respect and exhaustion. "You have changed the galaxy forever. I hope you understand what you have done." Do-hyun signed the human ratification. "We do. That's why we did it." 1 year later, Ambassador Park Soo-jin addressed the new Galactic Assembly. Behind her flew the flags of 47 free worlds. "A year ago, someone asked me why humanity refused to submit, why we fought when surrender seemed easier, why we risked everything." She looked out at faces from 100 worlds, friends, former enemies, beings who had once thought humans were primitives. "We refused because freedom is not something you trade for safety. We fought because some chains are worth dying to break. We risked everything because we would rather burn as free people than live as slaves." She smiled, the same fierce smile she had worn in battle. The council thought they would rule humanity. They learned instead what happens when humanity decides to rule itself. The assembly erupted in applause. Humans, Ven, Korthan, Silith, dozens of species, united by hope instead of fear. The galaxy had changed, and at the center of that change stood Earth, no longer a small world on the edge of known space, but the birthplace of freedom. The council had tried to rule humanity. They never recovered from humanity's response.